The sun hung merciless over the barren expanse of the western frontier as Naya urged her weary horse onward. Dust swirled in heated eddies around her boots, the dry air choking her every breath. Suddenly, sharp shouts broke the silence, the snarls of a ruthless gang of bandits emerging from the rugged brush, their eyes gleaming with greed and violence. Trapped on a narrow path with no help near, Naya's heart thundered in her chest as hands reached desperately for her reins. Danger closed in like a tightening noose. The vast, unforgiving land stretched endlessly beneath a cloudless sky, cracked earth baking beneath the fierce sun. Tumbleweeds skittered across the rocky soil, whispering secrets of this wild, untamed borderline where few dared wander alone. Heat waves shimmered against distant mesas, while crows cawed sharply high above, their cries piercing the stillness. This desert was both sanctuary and prison, and Naya was painfully aware of her isolation amid the cruel wilderness. Alone since dawn, Naya's face was lined with soot and sweat, eyes fierce yet shadowed with fatigue, every muscle coiled with determination. A woman hardened by loss, her soul forged in the fire of solitude. Her journey was perilous, fraught with threats lurking beneath the unyielding sun, yet she pressed forward, clutching memories of what she left behind. As the bandits closed in, desperation clenched her throat, but did not quell the stubborn flame of courage burning within her breast. The assailants descended with brutal swiftness, cutting off all escape routes. Their crude weapons flashed in the sunlight as they jeered and advanced, hungry for spoils. Naya's hands moved instinctively to the worn pistol at her hip, but there were too many, the odds stacked mercilessly against her. The world narrowed to pounding heartbeats and the deadly dance of survival as the outlaws jeered, threatening to drag her into shadow and ruin. Just as the bandits lunged, a sudden movement shattered the chaos, a shadow streaking through the dust with predatory grace. From the haze emerged Kiona, the fierce Apache warrior, eyes burning with a quiet intensity that radiated strength and ancient wisdom. Without hesitation, he intercepted the attackers with a controlled ferocity, his every move a blend of practiced skill and raw power. Naya's breath caught, a mixture of surprise and fragile hope blooming as her desperate plight found unexpected salvation. Together, they darted away from the fading echoes of battle, legs pounding through scorched earth toward the promise of refuge. But as they emerged from the sheltering thicket, their eyes locked on a grim sight, the unmistakable dust clouds raised by a prowling band of hostile colonists. The grim reality settled like a shadow. The danger was far from over. The patrol moved swiftly, threatening to catch them before safety could be found, turning their escape into a desperate race against fate. Many companions who journey with our forgotten legends across these forsaken lands have whispered that destiny, or the treacherous YouTube algorithm, sometimes strips their subscriptions away without warning. Before the next perilous trail unfolds and a new twist shakes this saga, take a quick glance below the video and make sure you're still riding with our band. We don't want you to miss a single voice echoing through this valley. Check your subscription now and join our odyssey. The fierce wind whipped through the narrow canyon where Kiona and Naya had made their temporary refuge, rustling dry leaves and stirring the dust at their feet. They sat opposite each other by a flickering fire, the amber flames casting long shadows that danced over their faces, one etched by hardship and stubborn resolve, the other shaped by silence that carried the weight of a warrior's hidden thoughts. The immediate danger of the returning colonist patrol still hung heavy in the air, a relentless reminder that the frontier spared no one. Naya's eyes, sharp and wary, flickered toward Kiona. Her pride battled with desperation. Accepting help from an Apache warrior, once seen only as an adversary, unsettled her very core. She still gripped the worn rifle she clung to like a talisman, the cold metal a faint reassurance against a world that had betrayed her so often. Kiona's gaze was fixed on the distant horizon, where the ragged silhouettes of towering mesas stretched beneath the dying light. His jaw tightened as the news from both worlds reached his ears, whispers traveling faster than footsteps. The unlikely alliance, forged in the heat of battle, was no secret for long. Word had begun to spread through Apache camps and settler encampments alike, stirring murmurs ranging from disbelief to outright hatred. The crackle of the drying branches beneath their feet punctuated the strained silence between them. Naya finally broke it, her voice low but edged with fierce determination. "You saved me, but you break the code. Our people see your kind as enemies. How can I walk in their world now, carrying the mark of an Apache?" Kiona's eyes met hers, steady and unreadable, as though he weighed every word before daring to respond. "It is not weakness to save a life, even if it belongs to a stranger. But the path I chose, there will be consequences. I carry the burden of what my tribe will demand." Her breath hitched, caught between defiance and doubt. The world she traversed demanded trust only be given where it could be earned, and her trust was still a fortress barred and guarded. For hours, they sat beneath the jagged sky, two souls carved by survival, separated by centuries of conflict, but bound now by a fragile thread. The night deepened, accentuating the unspoken fears that writhed just beneath their words. Kiona's silence spoke as loudly as any vow. He knew the return to his people would not be a simple homecoming, but a reckoning. The following dawn woke them not with relief, but with urgency. From the whispering pines atop a distant ridge, a figure appeared, riding hard and purposeful. Dust rose in a shimmering plume and marked the rider's path with a bleak warning. The man was a messenger from the Apache Council, bearing an official summons for Kiona. Naya's fingers instinctively tightened on her belt, her pulse quickening. The summons was no idle request. It was a call that could shatter the tenuous peace they had carved out. The messenger swung down from his steed, cloak drawn tight against the biting morning chill. His eyes, dark and grave, held the steady coldness of duty. Without a word, he handed Kiona a folded strip of leather, a message inscribed in the careful hand of the tribal scribe. Kiona unfolded it with deliberate care, eyes scanning the characters etched in ink that spoke both of tradition and impending judgment. The words cut through the cold air. The council demanded his presence, to explain the unprecedented choice of aiding a settler woman, an act viewed by many as betrayal. The weight of that demand laid itself across Kiona's shoulders. He glanced at Naya, who watched him with a mixture of hope and apprehension. "This is the path I must walk," he said quietly. "But it changes everything. For you, for me, for what fragile promise we might still hold." The messenger nodded once, and withdrew without another word, the soft clatter of hooves fading against the scrubland. For a moment, Kiona and Naya faced the uncertain horizon together, each wrestling with their own fears and the wall of suspicion rising on all sides. The fragile thread that had bound them was now tested by the wider world, whose eyes looked upon their alliance with suspicion, fear, and the cold glare of tradition. As they saddled their horses, preparing to face the unknown tensions waiting in the heart of the Apache camp, the silence between them was no longer empty. It hummed with the electric charge of what was to come. The doubtful trust they shared was both weapon and shield. In the distance, beyond the crunch of their boots on dry earth and the whispered prayers carried by the wind, the shadow of an ancient council loomed, a gathering where judgment, honor, and loyalty would collide. Kiona tightened his hold on the reins, the leather chafing beneath his fingers as if reminding him of the chains of duty. Beside him, Naya spurred her horse forward, the restless determination clear in her every movement. The tribe's summons would not wait, and neither could the fragile hope they embodied. As the two figures disappeared into the rugged trail leading back to the heart of the Apache homeland, the winds whispered a warning carried through the canyons. A reckoning had come, and with it, the fragile prospect of allegiance hung by a thread. Tomorrow the tribe would demand answers. The council fire flickered weakly under the open sky, casting long, wavering shadows over the gathered faces of the Apache tribe. The air carried a tense stillness, broken only by the crackling embers and the restless murmurs of those summoned to witness a trial unlike any before. Kiona stood at the center, shoulders squared, but eyes heavy with the knowledge of all that was at stake. Around him, familiar faces bore expressions fractured by conflicting loyalties, respect and reverence mixing uneasily with suspicion and outrage. Silent for a heartbeat, the elder Chefetawa rose, his voice measured, yet laced with the weight of tradition. "Kiona, your act of mercy, extending aid to a settler woman, has sent ripples through our people. We gather to hear your reasoning and determine whether your path honors our ancestors or defies them." Ishko, the tribe's fierce and unyielding warrior, stepped forward, his gaze burning with accusation. His voice was sharp, slicing through the smoky night. "To shelter an outsider, one of those who encroach upon our lands, is betrayal. The code we live by does not bend for strangers, nor does it excuse weakness. This act endangers us all." Kiona's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm, edged with a quiet defiance that spoke of inner conviction. The land belongs to no one alone. To save a life, even that of a settler, is not betrayal. It is the courage to choose what is right over what is easy. Naya, saved from death, may yet be a bridge for peace, or, at worst, a testament that our humanity endures. Murmurs rippled among the council, some nodding with solemn agreement, others shaking their heads resolutely. The divisions ran deep. Tawa raised a hand for silence and slowly spoke again. We cannot ignore the dangers this choice may bring. The colonists watch us warily. Our enemies, other tribes and bandits, seek any sign of weakness. Kiona's actions may invite attacks upon us. Yet, to punish him outright risks tearing wounds where healing might take root. Kiona held Tawa's gaze, a flicker of gratitude and sorrow in his eyes. Yet the unexpected arrival of a young warrior broke the fragile hold the council had on the night's calm. Breathless and wide-eyed, the scout announced grim news. A rival band, fierce and hungry for dominance, had been spotted approaching the Apache lands just beyond the western ridge. A collective shudder passed through the tribe. The fragile tensions of the council were instantly overshadowed by a more immediate threat. Ishko's lips formed a cruel smile. Perhaps this is proof that Kiona's betrayal weakens us. The enemy moves while we debate honor and mercy. Kiona's eyes darkened. There will be no surrender to fear. Our strength lies not only in the edge of our weapons, but in the unity of our people. The council erupted as warriors guarded their families and livelihoods, their voices a tempest of fear, anger, and resolve. Kiona moved through the gathering, his presence commanding a hesitant respect. Meanwhile, far beyond the tribal firelight, Naya's path was no less fraught. Under the cover of twilight, in a nearby settler camp, whispers of dissent swirled like restless smoke. Surrounded by the harsh, crude faces of men who saw her as a liability, rumors grew louder. Rumors that she had allied herself with the Apaches, the very enemies they feared most. The men paced, voices low but venomous. Their hate was sharpened by loss and long-held prejudice. But what unsettled them most was the threat she now represented. A woman who had crossed the invisible line and lived to challenge their world. Naya's gaze was steady but wary. With each passing night, the hunt tightened. She no longer trusted the shadows or the warmth of any campfire. Yet beneath her hardened exterior, a restless spark of determination burned brighter. To live under their scorn was one challenge, to outwit and outlast them another altogether. Back at the council site, the debating voices quieted as Chefe Tawa called for order. "We must prepare," he declared solemnly. "The enemy approaches swiftly. Our survival demands we stand together or fall divided." Ishko's bitter eyes scanned the crowd, his disdain for Kiona unchanged. But even he knew the coming days would test every bond in the tribe, old grudges and fears against the necessity for strength in unity. Kiona stepped forward, the burden of his choice now heavier than ever. His gaze settled on the horizon where the first hues of impending dawn bled through the dark. "I will lead our defense," he vowed, "but the fight will not be won by swords alone." A heavy silence settled over the council, broken only by the resolve growing in whispers among the warriors. The battle to come was not only for land or survival. It was for the soul of their people. As the fires dimmed and the tribe readied for what awaited beyond the cliffs, the night air carried an ominous warning. From the edges of the distant forest, shadows moved. A hostile force, silent and swift, preparing to strike at the heart of the Apache homeland. The fragile thread, holding together the tribe's allegiance, began to fray under the weight of an attack no one saw coming. The early morning air grew thick with tension as Kiona gathered the warriors beneath the towering mesas, their faces etched with weariness and determination. The sun was just beginning to cast its pale light over the horizon. But the shadows of the impending attack clung stubbornly to the rugged landscape. The rival band, fierce and unpredictable, was closing in fast, and every breath felt heavy with the weight of what was to come. Kiona's hand rested steady on the hilt of his bow as he surveyed the gathering. Though his body still bore the marks of recent battle, deep cuts along his arm, and a bruise blossoming dark under his ribs, there was no faltering in his voice as he spoke. "We know the land better than any enemy that dares cross its edge. Stay alert. Move with the wind. Protect what is ours." A murmur of affirmation rippled through the circle, warriors tightening grips on their weapons, eyes scanning the trails opening into the dry wilderness. Kiona's strategy was clear: to avoid a direct confrontation where their numbers might be a weakness, and instead use the terrain, canyons, rock outcrops, and hidden passes to outmaneuver their foes. Every man and woman here was ready to fight. But more than that, they were prepared to survive, to defend their people's honor and homes. Meanwhile, miles away, Naya rode with fierce determination, the dust kicking up behind her horse as she fled an ambush set by vengeful colonists. The scars of mistrust hardened in her chest as she recalled the cold eyes of those men, their hatred sharpened by fear and old wounds. Yet she was no longer the helpless woman who had been rescued. The lessons Kiona had shared, how to move silently, read the signs of the land, and hold still beneath the storm of danger, now guided her every step. When the band of colonists lunged from cover, hoping to catch her off guard, Naya's reflexes were swift. She ducked low behind a jagged boulder, heart pounding but mind sharp. Her breath came steady, every muscle coiled like a spring. The rifle at her side felt lighter now, an extension of her will rather than a mere tool. As the raiders searched blindly, cursing her escape, Naya melted into the wilderness, vanishing like a shadow swallowed by the earth. Back at the Apache camp, the tension was escalating. The council fire flickered weakly, its glow battled by the encroaching dawn and the weight of the decisions crowding the minds of elders and warriors alike. The news of the approaching threat had revived latent fears of reprisals, of tribal divisions wider than the Great Plains, stretching out beyond their sight. Chefitawa sat with heavy eyes, the lines on his weathered face deepened by sleepless nights and the burden of leadership. He listened as voices clashed, those calling for rigid defense and tradition, others pleading for unity in the face of turmoil. The matter of Kiona's alliance with Naya was no longer a distant question. It had become inseparable from the survival of their people. Ishko, ever the firebrand, paced with restless fury, His words cut through the murmuring crowd. We welcome chaos by sheltering an outsider. Our enemies sense hesitation. Our enemies hunt us while we argue here like children. The time for mercy has passed. But even the fiercest argued in whispers, now that real danger lurked. Beyond the ridge, the rival tribe, or bandits perhaps just as deadly, were not mere shadows in the distance. They were a force sullying the lands the Apache had long called home. Kiona's voice rose calm but resolute. The strength of this tribe will not be found in fear or division. We face a storm together, or we surrender piece by piece. My choice to protect Naya was a step into unknown ground, yes, but if it teaches us anything, it is that our enemies underestimate the bonds that can form when old wounds begin to heal. Ears tuned to every word, some warriors nodded silently, their eyes shadowed with hope. Others clenched their jaws, struggling against the tide of change. Elsewhere, under the veiled cloak of night, Naya rested briefly in a thicket, the wind carrying sounds of the distant camp preparing for war. Her thoughts churned with the fragile hope blossoming between her and Kiona, but also with the starker reality. Her presence ignited fierce hatred. Ishko's whispered schemes to eliminate her before the council's formal vote had not been forgotten. She was a target, not just a survivor. Her fingers brushed a small charm gifted by Sarita, Kiona's sister, a reminder that she was no longer alone in this vast wilderness. Courage now ran through her veins, not born just from fear, but from an unyielding will to live, and to fight for something greater than herself. Back at the council grounds, dawn now fully broke, casting an unrelenting light on the faces gathered for one of the tribe's most critical moments. Chefe Tawa stepped forward, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. Tomorrow we will vote. This alliance will be declared, or it will be broken. But know this, our enemies wait for weakness. We must be united, or we all fall. Ishko's gaze fixed on Naya's name, spoken by elders and whispered amongst warriors alike, as the threat she embodied grew heavier with each passing day. The air was thick with suspense and unspoken threats. Kiona stepped beside the chief, bruised yet unbowed, ready to bear the weight of what they were about to decide. Around them, the tribe braced for the coming storm, a storm not only of war, but of loyalty, honor, and survival. As the council fire sputtered low, the restless shadows along, the trees grew darker and deeper still. From those shadows, Ishko was already weaving his deadly plan, a secret move to strike at Naya before the vote could secure her place in their fragile world. The sun dipped low behind the mesas, as Kiona gathered his closest allies beneath the sheltering rocks, the air heavy with the scent of dust and impending storm. Among them stood Sarita, Kiona's fierce sister, eyes sharp and alert, despite the weight of the task before them. News had come swiftly. A plot brewed in the shadows, aimed at capturing or worse, eliminating Naya. The scheme was no mere whisper. It was a dark tide threatening to fracture the fragile unity the tribe had painstakingly formed. Kiona's voice cut through the tense murmurs, steady as the steady beat of a war drum. They believe that if Naya falls, I will falter, and the tribe will splinter. We cannot let that happen. Sarita stepped forward. We move at dawn. We take what forces we can trust, and we find her before they do. The land is vast, but their footsteps give them away. We will be faster. Naya, seated on a fallen log nearby, met their eyes with a fire that matched the fading light. Despite her weariness, her spirit had not dimmed. The trials she had endured only sharpened her resolve. I will come with you, she said softly. I have learned more than just survival. I know this land's silence, its secrets. I can help. The nods that met her words carried weight. A reluctant acceptance born of necessity, not ease. For all the walls built of suspicion and old fears, something stubborn and new was growing between them. That night, beneath a tapestry of stars, smeared thin across the clear desert sky, the small company prepared. Bows were strung taut, rifles were checked, and whispered prayers slipped like smoke back into the restless wind. Hours later, as the moon cast silvery shadows over cracked earth and dry brush, they slipped silently into the darkness. The pack moved like ghosts through the skeletal trees, senses sharp for the faintest breath of danger. Every moment brought the risk of betrayal. Trust was precious and scarce. Sarita kept close to Naya, her presence a shield against unseen threats. Kiona brought up the rear, eyes scanning the horizon. Muscles coiled to spring. The land seemed to hold its breath alongside them. Tension simmered beneath every glance. Naya found herself watching Sarita with a mixture of gratitude and unease. Sisterhood was a language she had yet to learn, but one she deeply needed. Days passed in a blur of motion and silence. The company navigating harsh ravines and twisted canyons. At times, the air weighed heavy with unspoken fears. At others, the shared struggle forged tentative bonds tighter than words. One evening, as the sun bled its last red across the sky, a shadow detached itself from the trees. Enemy scouts. Kiona's hand was on his bow in a heartbeat, signaling the group to halt and hide. Breaths steamed in the cool air as they folded into earth. And brush, hearts pounding beneath stillness. The scouts passed, voices low and harsh, speaking of a prize to be taken, and plans unfolding to cripple Kiona through the loss of Naya. When the threat faded, the company pressed forward with renewed urgency. The danger closing in was no longer a distant rumor, but a stain growing darker and thicker with every beat of their tired bodies. Then, beneath a twisted juniper, the ambush struck. Sarita, who had taken point, was pulled into the grasp of rough hands before a call could warn the others. Struggles broke through the hushed night as frantic shouts pierced the fragile calm. Naya's scream cut sharp as she leapt forward, but the enemy vanished into the night with their captive. Kiona's eyes burned with a fierce storm. She's taken, he growled. Now the true fight begins. His fists clenched, bones straining under the force. The mission that had once been to protect a life had turned into a desperate chase to save family, and the cost of failure was unthinkable. The night seemed to close in around them, swallowing their shouts and footsteps, as the company needed to decide. Pursue and risk walking into a trap, or regroup and plan against an enemy growing bolder? Naya's voice broke through the turmoil, steady despite the dread that threatened to unravel her. We cannot wait. Sarita's life is tethered to ours. We end this now. Kiona met her gaze, a fierce respect sparking between them. The fragile alliance was tested now by fire, not of old grudges or whispered fears, but by blood and sacrifice. With no time for hesitation, they mounted their horses, the night wind whipping fiercely as they tore into the darkness after the captors. The trail was faint, the air thick with the scent of fear and fierce determination. Each mile burned away the distance, driving them toward a confrontation that could shatter the alliance or seal it forever. Beneath the cold stars, with every pounding hoof and breath ragged with urgency, Kiona and Naya rode side by side, bound by trust, fragile and fierce. Ahead, in the shadowed canyons, the captors lurked with Sarita, a prisoner caught in the crossfire of power and desperation. The fragile hope the tribe had nurtured now hung trembling as a single cry echoed through the night. A warning carried on the wind. Sarita was in their hands, and the cost of failure would be dire. The storm of battle and betrayal was poised to break, and no one could yet glimpse the toll it would exact. The weight of the impossible choice pressed down on Kiona as he rode hard beneath the bruised sky, the fading light catching on the scars still tender along his arm. Sarita's capture had shattered the fragile calm they'd barely begun to build. Every rhythmic beat of his horse's hooves was a drum of desperation, pounding a warning through the stark silence of the wilderness. A war was no longer a distant threat. It was now a knife pressed to their throat. Beside him, Naya's eyes burned with a fierce light. No trace of the trembling woman who once clung to fear for survival. She rode with a resolve deeper than the canyons that carved this unforgiving land. A leader proving her worth among warriors who had once seen her as nothing more than a desperate settler. Her voice broke the strained quiet. We cannot wait for their mercy. Every moment Sarita remains in their hands is a moment our cause grows darker, she said, her tone sharp but steady. Kiona turned his gaze toward her, silent gratitude shifting beneath the hard lines of his face. The council's looming decision, the whispers of distrust from his own tribe, all paled beside this immediate crisis. This was a fight for family, for the blood that tied them tighter than any tradition. Yet the question clawed at him relentlessly. Could striking now risk plunging their whole world into deeper chaos? The land around them was silent, but watchful, shadows lengthening beneath twisted juniper and cracked earth, as if nature itself held its breath. The risk was immense. Any misstep could ignite the fragile alliance into ruin and trigger a war none were prepared to bear. Still, hesitation was a poison they could not afford. Sarita was more than Kiona's sister. She was the embodiment of the trust beginning to bloom between two worlds. To lose her meant undoing every step they had forced themselves to take toward unity. And so he nodded, fierce resolve igniting in his dark eyes. We ride now, he declared. There is no going back. The company moved like a shadow through the wilderness, careful and silent. The moonlight, slanting through hot air that shimmered with danger. Naya matched their pace, her hands steady on the reins, as she listened for the faintest whisper of Sarita's captors. Each breath drawn was a prayer against failure. Hours stretched thin, like a fragile thread, the night swallowing time as they pursued the faintest trail. The winds carried not only dust, but the whispered threats of what might come. Retribution for their defiance, the relentless grinding of a conflict that knew no mercy. Suddenly, a sharp rustle shattered the fragile stillness. A call from Kiona, quiet but urgent. Down, hide. The riders dashed behind rocks and thorny bushes, hearts pounding in the heavy night as a scout party passed dangerously close, voices gruff and sharp. They spoke of a prize, a pawn meant to fracture the fragile peace. Sarita. Naya's finger tightened instinctively on the worn grip of her pistol. Every silent second stretched into eternity. When the danger slipped past, the company slipped forward with renewed urgency. There was no room for second guesses. Sarita's fate hung like a storm cloud ready to break. The land shifted beneath their hooves, rocky inclines, narrow passes echoing with the sound of their chase. In the distance, a grim silhouette materialized among the gnarled pines. Detours were no longer an option. The enemy held their captive close. Kiona's voice was low but fierce as he brought the riders to a cautious halt. They have her. Our shadows are the only shield left. Naya's gaze swept the terrain, mapping danger with the precision of a seasoned hunter. We move as one, speed and silence, no room for error. The nights here were long and merciless, but the fire ignited between them burned stronger than any fear. Their breaths mingled amid the cold air, marked by grit and an iron will to save what threatened to be lost. As they pressed deeper into the shadowed canyons, the tension tightened like a bowstring drawn to its limit. Every crack of dry twig, every shudder of leaves was a threat disguised as sound. Every heartbeat a countdown to confrontation. Ahead, Sarita's muffled struggles reached them like faint thunder across the stillness. Captors' voices, harsh and cruel, pierced the fragile veil of night. Kiona's hand gripped his bow with determination born of kinship and honor. We end this together. The horses fell silent as they prepared for the confrontation that would ripple far beyond this night. Naya steadied herself, the lessons carved into her muscles and mind guiding every movement. She was no longer the woman who needed saving. Now she was a vital part of their fragile alliance, protector and equal. From the winding shadows ahead, figures shifted, their foes, hardened and merciless. The fate of a sister, of a tribe's hope, hung heavy in the cold air. As the company poised to strike, Kiona and Naya exchanged a glance rich with unspoken promise. This battle was more than survival. It was the proving ground of something new, forged from courage, trust, and defiance of the shadows that chased them all. The fragile thread of alliance trembled, stretched taut by the weight of betrayal and sacrifice. Yet it held, for now, and just beyond the ridge, The ominous roar of unexpected reinforcements crackled through the night. A thunderous force of colonizers and mercenaries, brandishing weapons, aiming to shatter every fragile hope born beneath the desert stars. The camp stirred beneath the darkening sky as the siege tightened its grip. Tension thrummed like a living thing in every soul gathered within the sheltered embrace of the rocky mesa. Naya adjusted the leather strap across her chest, feeling the weight of responsibility heavy and immediate. Around her, warriors sharpened blades and murmured ancient prayers, each movement edged with the quiet resolve of those who knew this night might be their last. Kiona stood near the fire's dying embers, his gaze unwavering as he traced the jagged horizon. His arms still throbbed from the scars of previous battles, but his spirit burned undiminished. Beside him, Sarita's sharp eyes scanned the perimeter, every muscle coiled and ready. Despite the physical pain and unseen wounds, none of them wavered. This fight, they understood, was more than survival. It was the crucible for their future. Tomorrow, Kiona's voice broke the silence. The opposing forces will test our will. We will not falter. Naya stepped forward, voice steady yet fierce. These lands do not belong to fear. Our strength lies in unity. Their words, measured yet blazing with conviction, rippled through the camp. The stirrings of hope fought against the shadows of doubt that Ishko sowed like bitter seeds. His presence was a constant, a restless storm simmering among the ranks. Ishko's dark eyes flicked sharply to Kiona, the firelight sharpening the lines of his grim scowl. "You gamble with the tribe's fate," he hissed quietly to those close enough to hear. "Your alliance with this settler weakens us. Tradition demands strength, not weakness." But even his whispered venom was drowned out by the growing alliance, fragile though it was. Every warrior in the camp felt the weight of what was at stake. More than just the land or pride, it was trust forged in fire, blood, and shared peril. As the night deepened, preparations continued in grim silence. Bones creaked under worn leather. Weapons clicked sharply in hands, wet with sweat and dust. Sarita's hand brushed briefly against Naya's arm, a silent signal of solidarity, of sisterhood born through shared struggle. Naya met the glance, something unspoken passing between them. Suspicion remained, but so did growing respect. The night had barely settled when shadows moved beyond the camp's edge. Ishko's voice sliced through the stillness again, a thrill of accusation laced within. "He who trusts the enemy invites destruction. Our foes watch, waiting for us to weaken." Kiona's hand tightened around his bow, steady despite the storm inside. "Our strength lies not in fear, but in choosing hope over hatred." Hours stretched as the camp braced, breaths held against the approaching storm. The first signs emerged, the distant murmur of boots against cracked earth, the restless whisper of steel stirring in the dark. Naya crouched behind a boulder, eyes sharp as her heartbeat thundered. Every shadow felt alive with menace. Beside her, Sarita's fingers hovered near her knife, muscles taut as a bowstring. Suddenly, the camp's outer watch cried warning. Figures moved fast, too fast, mercenaries sent by colonists, armed and merciless. Their war cries, a cruel anthem against the night. The battle erupted like wildfire. Warriors surged forward, blending like shadows and steel, their cries echoing through the canyons. Kiona led with ferocious determination. Every arrow loosed, a testament to the tribe's fierce spirit. Naya ducked low behind a shattered wagon, returning fire with a rifle sharpened by weeks of survival. Her breath came ragged, but her aim was steady. This was no longer the woman who once ran without hope. She'd become a guardian of the fragile dream between two worlds. Amid the chaos, Ishko slipped away, not among the fighters, but into the cold silence between the storms. His face, cold and calculating, shimmered briefly by the firelight of a nearby campfire. A confrontation loomed. The night wore on, crashes and screams carving the darkness until exhaustion began to weigh heavy. Yet in the quiet moments between assaults, the uneasy truth settled among the survivors. The greatest threat was no longer outside the walls. At the edge of the camp, where hope tangled with fear, Kiona turned sharply, confronting Ishko face to face. The older warrior's eyes gleamed with bitter rage, lips curling in a wound of pride and desperation. "You threaten us all," Kiona said quietly, voice low but unforgiving. Ishko's laugh was brittle, a shard of ice breaking the simmering tension. "The tribe cannot survive your softness. There is no place for mercy in this harsh land. You have betrayed us." Their words hung like a blade between them, electric and sharp. A crowd gathered, breaths caught, as the two men wrestled with the fate of their people in silence louder than any battle cry. Then, as suddenly as the confrontation flared, Ishko was gone. No warning, no claim, just vanished into the thick night, leaving behind a cloud of suspicion and a chilling dread. Naya's gaze swept the dusky horizon, unsettled but resolute. "He's plotting still." Kiona's jaw clenched. "And we will be ready." The camp breathed in the cold night air, every heartbeat loud with the knowledge that tomorrow's dawn would bring more than just light. It would bring war, choices, and the reckoning of all they had fought to build. In the fragile silence, beneath a canopy of stars, blanketing the vast western sky, the whispers went out, a warning carried by the restless winds. Ishko had disappeared, and with him, a shadow deeper than before crept into the heart of the tribe. The dawn painted the sky with a reluctant light, the desert still holding its breath as warriors and settlers alike braced for what was to come. The final battle had drawn its dreadful curtain, and as the first rays seeped through jagged mesas, the air thrummed with a mixture of exhaustion and fierce resolve. Kiona stood at the crest of a low ridge, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. The bruises along his arm ached with every breath, a stubborn reminder of the fight just fought. Yet, beneath the weary exterior, a hard core of unyielding spirit earned. The opposing forces had tested them to the limit, but they had not broken. Below him, the camp stirred with controlled urgency. Naya moved with steady purpose, rallying the colonizer allies into lines to hold back any further threats. Her transformation was undeniable. From the frightened woman who had once clung to survival, she had become a leader forged in the crucible of battle. Her calm commands cut through the chaos, threads holding fragile order together. The clash had been fierce. Warriors blending with colonizers, weapons flashing amidst dust and sweat. The cries of the wounded mingled with the sharp bark of orders and the thundering of hooves. Fierce. Loyalty had shone through every gesture, every sacrifice. Bloodied hands reached out to pull comrades to safety, eyes alight with desperation and hope. Amidst the turmoil, Sarita fought with burning courage, her blade an extension of her will as she defended the camp's flank. Her presence was a beacon, a symbol of the Alliance's strength, the living proof that bonds forged in fire could defy the most bitter enmity. Yet even as victory seemed to lean toward them, the shadow of betrayal lingered. Ishko's sudden disappearance had sent ripples of unease through the camp. Now, as the battle waned, word spread, whispered confessions and furtive glances revealing his intent had been something darker still. He was no longer among their ranks, vanished like a ghost into the dusky wilds. In the dim light, near the edge of the encampment, Kiona's voice was low but charged when he addressed those gathered. This fight was ours to win, but the war is far from over. Ishko's treachery may yet cost us dearly. We must be vigilant. Naya's gaze met his, shadows of the battle still etched on her face. His betrayal wounds us as deeply as any arrow, but we stand because our courage was greater. The council fire flickered weakly beneath a settling dusk, casting flickering shadows over hardened faces. An unspoken truth gnawed at the edges of their relief. Wounds ran deep, and the path ahead remained perilous. This battle had sealed their alliance, but also illuminated the price it demanded. Trust earned through tempest and sacrifice, never guaranteed. The survivors tended the wounded with quiet reverence, hands gentle and careful despite the rough edges of frontier life. Naya knelt beside a fallen warrior, her fingers brushing a stray lock of hair from a pale brow. Her thoughts raced, despite the victory, the lingering threats. Colonists entrenched in hatred, rival factions unsettled by their unity, loomed large. As twilight slipped fully into night, the flicker of torches bobbed across the camp's perimeter. Kiona stood with Sarita, their silhouettes sharp against the dying glow of embers. The weight of leadership pressed heavily, yet neither faltered. Theirs was a new era, precarious and fragile, written with every choice made in the shadow of conflict. Suddenly, a sharp shift in the night's quiet shattered the fragile peace. Near the outer edge, figures moved stealthily, shadowed shapes, slipping through scrub and rock. The tension spiked instantly, hearts pounding as weapons were drawn and whispered warnings snapped through the air. Naya's hand tightened on her rifle, eyes flashing with a steely edge. "Enemies or traitors," she breathed. "We must stand ready." Kiona's bow was raised, muscles coiled like springs. His voice carried steady resolve. "We defend the promise we fought for. No shadows will undo what we have built." The moments stretched taut like the string of a drawn bow, breaths suspended between dawn and darkness. But then, amid the restless stirrings, a heavy silence fell. The threat withdrew as quietly as it had come, leaving a charged emptiness in its wake. Yet the unease remained, as if the night itself whispered that the cost of peace was a vigilant heart. Later, as the camp settled under a thick blanket of stars, Kiona and Naya stood apart from the gathering, their gazes fixed on the distant horizon, now a place of both hope and endless challenge. The alliance had been forged not just in battle, but in sacrifice and defiance of old wounds. Yet, as dawn promised to come again, the path ahead was clear. Peace would demand vigilance, strength, and the courage to face threats from without and from within. The dawn's light revealed the bruised land, but also the fierce determination in their eyes, a shared promise that this new era, born from blood and battle, would not fade quietly into the shadows. And as the camp breathed beneath the vast western sky, the weight of responsibility settled heavy. The road to lasting peace was long, its burdens carried by many hands sworn to a fragile, hard-won allegiance. The dawn cast a pale wash of light over the battered camp, the air thick with the scent of dust and spent gunpowder. Kiona stood at the ridge's edge, shoulders squared but weighed down by the bruises that throbbed in his arm. Every muscle ached, yet his gaze remained sharp, scanning the horizon for any sign of lingering danger. The battle had subsided, but the war, both within and without, lingered stubbornly. Naya moved through the encampment, her voice carrying steady commands as she coordinated colonist allies into order, ensuring the wounded found care and that defenses held strong against any renewed threat. The transformation she had undergone was undeniable. Once a frightened woman fleeing death, she now stood resilient, a beacon of leadership forged through pain and unyielding resolve. Sarita, despite exhaustion, circled the camp's perimeter with blade drawn, her eyes keen and unwavering. Her presence reminded all that this alliance was more than survival. It was a shared commitment born of fire, blood, and sacrifice. Yet, beneath the fragile glow of victory, a shadow coiled unseen. Ishko's disappearance unsettled the tribe. Whispers spread, rumors of his betrayal, the threat of his venomous schemes still simmering beyond sight. Kiona's voice finally broke the simmering silence among the warriors gathered near the dying fire. "This battle tested our strength," he said, voice low and resolute. "But Ishko's treachery cuts deeper than any blade. His absence is no end. It is a warning. We must remain vigilant." Naya met his gaze, the scars of recent conflict etched into her face, yet her eyes blazed with fierce determination. "He sought to unravel everything we've built, but we stand because our courage overcame his hate." The elders nodded gravely. Chefe Tawa stepped forward, his weathered face softened by a blend of relief and sorrow. "The dawn of a new era lies before us," he said quietly. "An era born not only from battle, but sacrifice and the courage to unite. This alliance, fragile though it be, is the bridge over years of blood and mistrust. We owe it to our people to guard it fiercely." Outside the circle of firelight, the camp settled into uneasy vigilance. The night whispered warnings, carried by restless winds, shadows flickering at the edge of sight, the weight of imminent challenges pressing upon every soul. In a rare quiet moment, Naya and Kiona stood apart from the others, their eyes drawn toward the distant mesas that framed the horizon. The land embodied both the bitter scars of their past and the fragile hope of their future. "We fought not only for survival," Kiona murmured, "but for a promise to forge something new, born of understanding and respect." Naya nodded slowly. "The path ahead is long and uncertain, but if we carry what we learned here, the strength to see each other as more than enemies, then peace is possible." Their hands found one another's briefly, a silent affirmation of the bond that had grown stronger through trial. Around them, the camp's murmurs softened into a tentative calm, as if the very earth sighed, a quiet witness to the dawn of possibility. But peace, they knew, was not a gift freely given. It demanded endurance, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment. The road ahead would be fraught, and the ghosts of old wounds would not vanish overnight. Yet beneath the sprawling western sky, heavy with the weight of their shared history, the tribes and settlers gathered not as foes, but as uneasy allies, a community forged in fire, ready to face the fragile promises of a new day. Kiona turned back to face the camp, where their people, scarred but unbroken, began to rebuild. Sarita approached, her presence a steady reminder that family and unity could bridge the deepest divides. Together, they watched as the first rays of sunlight kissed the rugged cliffs, illuminating a landscape once shattered by conflict, but now resplendent in hope. The battles had been fierce, and the losses painful. Yet from the ashes, a fragile allegiance had emerged, one woven through courage, compassion, and the willingness to embrace a future shaped not just by survival, but by shared humanity. Ishko's shadow lengthened still, a reminder that vigilance would forever be required. But beneath the enduring sky, the tribe had taken its first unsteady steps toward coexistence. As the encampment stirred with quiet purpose, Kiona spoke softly. "This is only the beginning. The true test will be our will to carry this peace forward, to heal what was broken, and to honor the sacrifices made." Naya's voice joined his, steady and clear. "Our stories are intertwined now, not as enemies, but as partners bound by the land and the lives we choose to protect." A breeze swept through the camp, stirring dust and embers alike, as if the very wind carried a promise whispered by all who had endured, that the frontier, for all its harshness, could one day echo not with the sounds of war, but with those of hope. Beneath the vast, unyielding western sky, a new chapter began, a story of fragile peace and enduring courage, ready to be written by those brave enough to listen, to learn, and to stand together. The Apache and the settlers would forever walk a narrow path, fraught with peril and promise. But for the first time in memory, that path was shared. And in the silent light of dawn, that truth was as powerful as any battle cry.